Hilchos Tumas Tzaraas Perek Sheni, the laws of impurity of Tzaraas, chapter 2. Yesterday, the Rambam spent some time defining nega. What is a qualifying lesion to be considered Tzaraas? And we gave the 4 shades of white and the different rules. It has to be deeper than the skin. It has to be the size of a gris. Those are all the things that go into defining the lesion itself. But then, as the Rambam told us at the end of the chapter, in order for a lesion to become impure, it has to have a siman tuma, a sign of impurity. There are 3 signs of impurity for skin Tzaraas. Seyar lavan, white hair, 2 white hairs appearing in the lesion. Michya, a healthy blotch of skin in the lesion. And pisyon, spreading. The lesion was originally one size, and then it spread to a larger size. But the way it's going to work now is chapter 2 is going to be dedicated to the Seyar lavan, chapter 3 to the Michya, chapter 4 to the pisyon. So we're getting 1 chapter for each of the Simanei Tuma. Today, we're focused on the Seyar lavan. The Rambam is going to define what qualifies as a white hair, and a very important rule that the white hair needs to appear after the lesion appears. First it's the blotch on the skin, and then the hairs appear in it. And if it's out of order, or many different cases as we'll learn about, it doesn't qualify as an impure lesion. Says the Rambam halacha aleph, Seyar lavan shehu siman tuma b'Tzaraas, the white hair, which is stated in the Torah as a sign of impurity when it comes to Tzaraas, ein paches mishtei sayres. Even though Torah uses the word hair in the singular, it's no less than 2 hairs. There has to be 2 white hairs in the lesion. The kama yiyah arkan, how long do they have to be? Kedei sheyiu nitalis bezug, long enough that they can be cut with a scissor. They can't be super short. Hoysa achas aruka. If one of the white hairs was longer than this amount, but one of them was shorter than that amount, it couldn't even be cut with a scissor. Or there are only 2 hairs in the lesion, but one is black and one is white. Or it's actually 1 hair at the root, but if it splits on top into 2 hairs, so it looks like 2 white hairs, but it's not actually 2 white hairs. Or the bottom of the hairs is black. The top of the hairs is what's white. As in this picture, every strand of hair is black on the bottom, white on the top. Hareza tahar. In all these cases, these are not qualifying white hairs, it's pure. The last 2 cases, the reason is because we always follow the core of the hair, the bottom of the hair. The bottom of the hair is black, it's considered a black hair. If the bottom of the hair is 1 hair, even if it splits in 2, it's still considered 1. But haya ikran malbin v'reishon mashchir. If the bottom of the hair was white, as in over here, only the tops were black, afal pisha halavan kolshehu, even if it's only white for a tiny amount, a minuscule amount is white on the bottom, tameh, that's considered a white hair, and the lesion is now impure if such a hair appears in a lesion of Tzaraas. Halacha beis, shtei sayres lavanes shehin b'seicha nega, the 2 white hairs that have to be in the lesion, they don't have to be right next to each other. Afal pisha yesh seyar shachar b'neian, even if there's lots of black hair in between them. V'hein mefuzares achas kan v'achas kan, and they're spread out. One is over here, one is over there. Harei elu siman tuma, they qualify as a sign of impurity. Afilu haya hanega ki gris mitzumtzum, even if the lesion was the minimum amount size exactly, just that size of 6 by 6 hairs, as we saw yesterday, ein makim haseir hashachar mematoi, the fact that there's black hair occupying space in the lesion doesn't lessen the space of the lesion. It's still considered to be a gris, it's still considered to be a qualifying lesion, and if there are 2 white hairs somewhere in there, it's impure. It doesn't matter if the 2 white hairs were smack in the middle of the bahera, smack in the middle of the lesion. The hima kaftan, and it surrounds them completely. Or they were at the very edge of the baheres. In all scenarios, the person is impure. But if they were outside, right outside on the side of the lesion, but they weren't in it, you're pure. The skin upon which the 2 white hairs are growing also has to be white. And therefore it leads to the following conclusion. If you have 2 white hairs inside the lesion, but they're leaning outside, as hairs tend to do, you're still impure because they're growing in the white skin. If they were outside of the skin, but they're leaning into the skin, even they're lying on the lesion, they're not a sign of impurity because they're not growing in the white area. Halacha Gimel, when we talk about white hairs, the whiteness of the hair makes you impure at any shade. When it came to the lesion itself, there was 4 shades. Anything darker than that, It's not impure. The whiteness of the hairs could be any shade. Bein shahayu levanis kesheleg, bein shahayu levanis leven dehe b'yaser, whether they're white as snow or they're a very dark white. Hayulu mar'ehen lavan, since the appearance is white, tamei, it's impure. Halacha dalet. Ein seir lavan simen tuma, ad sheyiyeh beguf habaheres. Another rule. The rule is that the white hairs are not a sign of impurity unless they're on the body of the lesion itself. Meaning what? As we're going to see, there are many different types of skin spots upon which tzaraas can develop. You could have a classic baheres, classic white lesion on healthy skin. But then you could have what's going to be called in later chapters shchin. You have a boil or a burn, skin that's kind of scabbing. And then you have tzaraas built on that. And there's a whole bunch of cases and a whole bunch of laws on that. So what if those two merged when it came to a baheres? Ketzad, what does this mean? Baheres u'b'seicha shchin. Let's say you have a baheres, which is a white lesion, but inside is something else. Maybe scabbed skin from a boil, or michva or a burn, or bayhak or some other pigmentation, or michias hashchin, or michias hamichva, or healthy skin that's beginning to heal from a boil or from a burn. And the two white hairs are inside the boil area, or the healing area, or the pigmented area that's inside the lesion. So lesion is here, then you have another little thing inside, and the white hairs are growing inside that. Einen simen tuma. That's not a sign of impurity. That's what it means. It has to be begufa shel baheres. The white hair has to be growing in the white part of the lesion. And it's treated like a lesion that doesn't have any white hair, which the law is that you quarantine it, like we saw yesterday. If a Kohen sees a lesion with no simen tuma, you put it in quarantine. Even though there's a lesion right around that boil. Oyas hamichva, or around the burn, oyas michyasan, or the healing skin, oyas habayak, or the pigmentation, sheyesh ba and shtei asayros, where the two hairs are. It could be literally all around the white. Doesn't make a difference. If the white hair is not in the white, it's not impure. Same thing, if you had this burn, or the boil, or the healing skin, or the pigmentation around the two hairs. In other words, there it is. You have white, shchin, or whatever stuff, and then there's more white, and there are the two hairs. But the two hairs are not growing in a white area that's big enough to be called tzaraas. This part is not a gris. Doesn't have 6 by 6 hairs. It interrupts, and now the white hairs are not called a sign of impurity. Which means that the white spot, the outer white spot, is not like a spot that has no white hair, and you simply put it into quarantine. You can't declare that it is actually impure. Now, by the way, just as an aside, this whole case where there's a shchin inside the baheres and there's white hairs inside the shchin, the commentaries deal with the fact that the shchin itself is a sign of impurity in a baheres, as we're going to see. So it has to be, as the commentaries say, we're talking about a very fresh boil, which is called moirdin. We're going to see this topic later in chapter 5 and chapter 6, that this specific type of boil is not a sign of tuma inside the baheres. Or perhaps the shchin is less than a gris itself. It isn't the size of the 6 by 6 hairs, therefore it's not a sign of impurity. But at any rate, the focus over here is the white hairs. Halacha hey, holchu lehen hashchin, vehaboyak, vehamichva, shehi kifu asasaydes halevanes. In this case, let's say that the shchin goes away. It leaves the part, or the burn, or the pigmentation that was surrounding the white hairs. Or was next to them, or was splitting them. In other words, while they were there, they were a problem. They interrupted the baheres from becoming impure. Now they left. And now the two white hairs are in the baheres, in the body of the baheres, after a week or two of quarantine. That's decidedly impure. If after the second week they didn't leave, then the Kohen simply exempts him, like any case of a tzaraas on the skin. After 2 weeks is exempt. Halacha vav, the very important rule I mentioned in the introduction, ein seyar lavan simen tuma, the white hairs are not considered to be a sign of impurity ad shetakdim habaheres es haseyar alavan, until the white spot comes before the white hairs. Shenemar, because the Torah, when it describes tzaraas, what does it say? V'hi hafcha sehar lavan. The Kohen sees the white spot, and the white spot turned the hair into white. Meaning, the white spot has to be there first to transform the hair into white. But if the white hair was there before the lesion, we ignore that white hair. The lesion is like a new lesion. It doesn't have any signs of tumah. The yasgir, and you simply put it into quarantine. Halacha zayin. Let's consider the following scenario. A person begins with a baheres, a proper lesion, with 2 white hairs inside it, and therefore he becomes decidedly impure because of it. Then the baheres disappears. But it left the white hairs there. Follow the details here. There's now only white hair left, v'toher, which makes the person pure, because there's no lesion. Then it came back. Another baheres in the exact same place where the first one was, with the white hair inside it. This is what the sages called the deposited hair, deposited as though the baheres has some personality. It deposited its hairs on the arm. It left it for safekeeping for the next baheres, but it didn't. This second baheres doesn't own the hairs. It's not a sign of impurity. Shenemar, because the same verse we quoted before, it says "V'hi hafchaser lavan." It needs to transform the white hairs. Shehafachato hi leishafachato chaverta. It, the original baheres, needs to, or in this case, the second baheres needs to turn the white hairs into white. Not that a different baheres turned it into white, and now it's just taking its friend's place. Halacha ches. Let's consider a bunch of different cases related to this concept. We're going to use the square just because it's simpler. It's an actual gris. Okay, this is the area of 6 by 6 hairs, just for argument's sake. So you had a baheres that was this size, with 2 hairs, and you were decidedly declared impure. Half of the gris left. 2 hairs are still there, but because the lesion is no longer the proper size, the person became pure. These 2 hairs remained in the half of the gris that remained. Comes back, that half a gris, in the exact same place where it was. And now what do you have? You have 2 white hairs in a baheres, which is the proper size of a gris. It's too bad. It's not a sign of impurity. One baheres needs to turn them both into white. In this case, when the second gris came back, now it's a new baheres. This new baheres needs to turn those 2 hairs white. If it didn't, if they're from before, so it's not a sign of impurity. Halacha tes, baheres kechatzi gris ve'in baklum. We begin with a half a gris, nothing in there. V'nilda bitzida baheres kechatzi gris, and then right next to it comes another half a gris, uba sayda achas, with only 1 hair. So now you have a full lesion, but not enough white hairs. Harezul haskir. That's pretty simple. 1 hair is not a sign of impurity, so you just put it into quarantine to see what happens. Baheres kechatzi gris uba sayda achas. What if it's like this? You start with a half a gris with 1 hair. The nildala baheres kechatzi gris uba sayda achas. Then comes a second one with a second hair. So by the time the lesion became full, there's 2 white hairs. But this white hair didn't become white when the full baheres was in place, only when the half was in place. Therefore, harezul haskir, you only have to put it into quarantine. This is not decidedly impure. Let's consider another case. Baheres kechatzi gris uba shtei saydes. You have a half a gris with 2 hairs already. The nodala baheres kechatzi gris uba sayda achas. And now comes the second gris with another hair. It doesn't matter that another hair came. Harezul haskir, you're still putting it in quarantine because there aren't a total of 2 hairs that were changed into white after the baheres reached full size. However, baheres kechatzi gris ve'in baklum. If you have a half a gris of a baheres with nothing, the nodala baheres kechatzi gris uba shtei saydes, then came another half a gris with 2 hairs. Harezul hachlit. Now you put it away, completely, decidedly impure. Shari kadma baheres lishtei asayros halavanas, because the full baheres comes before the 2 white hairs were transformed. And the Rambam concludes, Safek seyar lavan kadam, Safek habaheres kadma. Let's say you have a case with a baheres and 2 white hairs. That's all you saw as the result. You don't know, you're in doubt whether the white hair came first or the lesion came first. Harezu tameh, the Rambam rules that we have to rule stringently, that it's as we consider it as if the baheres came first and then the hairs, and you're impure. But it seems to me shatum asay b'safek, that the tumah here is in doubt. Now this last line of the Rambam today's chapter attracts a lot of discussion from the commentaries. First of all, because there's a story behind this last line. The Talmud tells us that there was an argument in the heavenly mesivta, in the heavenly yeshiva, whether such a case is pure or impure. And the Talmud says, Kuchabrichu amar toher. Hashem says pure. And the rest of the mesivta dirakia, the rest of the heavenly academy, said he's impure. And it's one of those cases where Hashem submitted to the opinion of the Heavenly Academy, and there's a whole Hasidic and mystical interpretation of what this means. How does the Heavenly Academy argue on God? How do we rule against God? The Rambam says that he's tameh. That means he's ruling like the Heavenly Academy against Hashem. It has to do with the mystical meaning of kuchabrichu, not Hashem in his essence, but Hashem in his lowered state, as he becomes present and in relationship with the world. It's a whole thing on this. I'm not going to get into it right now, but that's number one. And the Rabbi points to this halacha as an example of the power of the Torah. Hashem handed off the Torah to the sages to interpret and to rule, even if it goes against, so to speak, the opinion of Hashem himself. Because Torah is to be kept and observed in this physical reality. And if this physical reality, it's observable that it's impure, then it's impure. So that's one point. A second point is what the Rambam concludes, that it's tumasei b'safek. What does it mean that the tumah is in doubt? It's actually a bunch of ways, a bunch of approaches on this. There's one commentary to the Mishnah who writes that the Rambam means that this is not a classic tumah out of doubt. The first line, when you say if it's a doubt whether this one came first or a doubt whether that one came first, it's tameh. Obviously, it's tameh out of doubt. Why do you have to add if it's tameh out of doubt? The whole tumah, the whole question came because of the doubt. So he's saying that over here we're not ruling stringently simply out of doubt. This is the Torah's imposition. Torah is saying that we should treat this doubtful case as a definite case. But the Tzemach Tzedek, when he interprets the Rambam, he seems to be saying pretty clearly, and the Kesef Mishnah says the same thing, that the Rambam simply means to say that we're ruling out of doubt. Don't think this is a biblical imposition of impurity, because we don't know which one came first, so we cannot with certainty rule that it's impure. We can only rule that it's impure out of doubt. Which gets into a whole question whether the rule of ruling stringency out of doubt is a biblical rule or a rabbinic rule. Some proofs are derived from this law in the Rambam. But at any rate, we'll leave it at the halacha. The halacha is that if we're not sure if the Seir Lavan came first or the Baharas came first, then we have to treat the person as impure. When we finish on a good note, we'll just say the word toher, pure.